Yeah. Cool.
So again, kind of on the theme of, you know, making this as informative as possible for anyone that's listening. I asked on my Instagram, you know, is there any questions that people have for property, for someone who is in the property development space? And I've got quite a few questions, and I appreciate that this episode has literally been a bombardment of questions. But yeah, hopefully you can kind of stick with us. So I guess the first question from someone is, what are the loan percentages when acquiring land and building? Loan to value examples, we know with the traditional setup is usually 90 to 95%, and loan to value more dependent on the individual. So just to repeat again, so the question is, what are the loan percentages when acquiring land and building?
Land and building. So it depends on quite a few factors. So again, everything for your lender is like, if I'm your lender, what am I, if you ask me to lend you money, what am I going to look at? I'm going to look at your credibility. Also, like, what assets do you have, like, you know, as security? So, and what's the value of what I want to borrow against? So with the land deals, it depends. Like, land without planning permission is worth what the land is worth at the time, you know, regardless of whether or not you can potentially get planning. Your track record as an individual is also going to determine how much their loan to value is. Because if you're an existing land developer who's done 50 odd deals and has got planning on all their deals, you're a lot lower risk. So they're going to let you borrow at a lot lower percentages. I would say maybe, like, again, it's very speculative and it really depends on, for instance, but maybe they would lend, like the way I structured it was, maybe they lend at 60% loan to values. You have to put in a 40% deposit. Okay. But it depends on what the land is worth. So are you buying it with planning? Are you doing an option? Have you bought an option agreement where you've gone and got planning? So what you've agreed to buy it for is now way less than what it's actually worth. Because if you've got like land or some garages, and as garages, those garages are worth £100,000 because of what they yield in rent. But you agreed a purchase price for an option agreement at £100,000. But you then went and got planning, which means the land is worth 300. The bank might lend you, 100% of the purchase price. You might have a zero loan to value because you've added so much value by getting planning and buying the land at, a lower price. Build cost wise, they might lend you again, if you've got planning, like, they can see what your gross development value is of the scheme. They might lend you a stepped 100% of your build costs, which means if it's going to cost you 400k to build out, they might say you have to have 50k in your bank, but every time you spend 50k, we'll send out somebody to inspect it. Happy with the works, we'll give you your 50k back to do it again. So there's loads of different and creative ways you can structure stuff in finance, but it really all comes back to risk and reward and what's the value of the asset, what's the security you're giving to your lender. Because if you're buying somewhere that's worth 100,000 and you don't get planning, if you get the planning declined, that might drop to 50,000. So then they're going to look at what's their exposure. So there's kind of there's no real direct answer to that question because it's very specific to the individual deal that they're looking at. But I would just say to anybody that is looking at a land deal, obviously work very closely make sure you've gone in advance to see if there's been any planning applications that have been put in or declined or accepted or what the feedback has been on them. Also see if there's been any similar schemes in the area. Make sure you speak to an architect, speak to your broker as well to see what they think they can arrange for you, and look at, if you do have to put in a high deposit, how can you, what your tie-ins are for that particular deal to buy the land in the first place? How can you then exit if and when you get planning to develop that land?
So if they wanted to research, the planning history and all that stuff, is there like a database for them to check that?
Yeah, so every council has a planning portal where you can just type in the address and you can see all of the applications. So it's you can see all the existing plans, you can see the drawings, you can see you can see the result, you can see if it's gone to committee, you can even, if there's for example, sometimes there's active committee decisions on a planning result, and you can log in and watch those, it's almost like a court proceeding to decide whether or not the planning is going to be accepted. but you can go in and see the planner's notes on why something was passed or why it was declined. So yeah, you just, whatever council you're working in, you would just type in if it's Croydon Planning Portal, like Lewisham, Lambeth, etc. But everything's available online.
Cool. So the second question is, are the mortgage loans the recommended route, or are there any other type of loans that best fit this type of purchase, i.e. bridging loans? So I think
so for land, like for land and for flips, in terms of your fit for purpose finance, it will be short-term finance, because if you're a buy-to-let mortgage is for somewhere that you're buying that can be basically, the lender wants it to be in a lettable condition in the first sort of 30 days. So yeah, so that obviously land with nothing there, unless it's a garage that you're planning, to let out, it wouldn't be suitable. So you would be looking at a bridging or development finance for those.
Okay. Next question is, how does one find and verify good builders to do the work?
Okay, so this is a good question, because builders, there are so many good builders out there. Like in any industry, there's also loads of bad ones. There's a lot of portals online that you can use that allow you to obviously see like people's ratings, as like My Builder, Trusted Tradesman, Rated People, etc. But a personal recommendation like outstrips any online reviews. So when you're looking at a builder, obviously get multiple quotes. You don't always go with the highest, go with the lowest. You go with who obviously you think is going to do the best job. So for me, when I was originally looking at builders and looking at like creating a build team, my main thing was, okay, so you've said you've done X, Y, or Z, like let's go and see one of your existing projects. Can I talk to one of your past clients? Talk to a couple of your past clients, see if there were any issues there. And yeah, make sure you actually see the work they've done. So get that personal recommendation. Also, just make sure you have, probably in most cases, I will prepare my own contract with the builder rather than the other way around, and just provide clarity, because you're stepping into a space a lot of the time where you don't know everything about, the building works and what's required. So although you might have a contract with your builder of, how they get paid and when they get paid and for what, just have a very black and white, almost like head of terms. So as the client, I will be buying X, Y, or Z. If it's not included here, it's to be taken as, it's not included. In terms of the scope of works, you would have probably instructed an architect to do your drawings. So they should be building in accordance with drawings from X to make sure that they're compliant with building regulations. And yeah, that's pretty much it in regards to the builders.
Okay. Do you man have any questions?
No.
Run through, okay.
Just run through the questions.
Did I just build £140 to you directly?
Yeah.
That's probably £140 times the amount of questions. Those are different people.
I'm speeding through them, so it's like a speed dating of questions right now. So I don't know. I mean, you get a deal. It's
oh man. So the next question is, in regards to the environmental checks, who do we get in contact with to do checks before the discussions can take place regarding work?
The environmental checks.
Yeah. So I guess this is probably in regards to the land stuff still.
So yeah, so they would have like relevant. I think if they're talking about like you might have to do like soil samples and stuff like that to check like how far you have to go down for foundations and other things like that. But there will just be various reports you have to generate to support maybe your planning application. So I'm assuming that's what it's like their architect. Most of the time I work with my architects and stuff like that, to be honest. Again, it's specialization. I don't do anything with it. My architect, planning consultant, they prepare all of these documents for me to support my application to give it the best chance of being successful. So various different things, so whether that's like a day and night survey for light to see the impact of natural light, parking surveys, soil samples, the drainage surveys and things like that. But they're all put in a package that are put together like with our proposal to make it obviously as attractive as possible. Because if I'm going to somebody and asking for something, I'm effectively going to the council and saying, can you allow me to build this? Not just because I want to build it, because I want to make money. So I want to give them as much as possible, and the the least reason to have objections, or at least, you don't want them to give you something to say, can you come back and supply us with X, Y, or Z? So I think if you try and make your packages as comprehensive as possible, also it's it's first impressions. If you're the planning consultant and you open something up and it looks great, everything's there, all the stuff you want is there, even if you have maybe stuff that you don't like, you're a lot more likely to come back and have more of a what's the word, like smoother conversation with me to say, okay, I like it, but can you tweak X, Y, or Z?
Fair. Where can one purchase land? It may seem simple, but are the normal property websites the best place to buy land? Or are there specific companies who specialize in land only deals?
So I mean, you do have like Rightmove Commercial, which has a lot of land deals on there. You see auctions, like all your auction houses, so whether that be Alsop, Savills, Auction House London, Andrew and Robinson, like they have a lot of different throughout the auction portals is generally speaking where people put land, because the purchase is a lot less straightforward. So people just want to know that, look, you buy it, I'm selling it, and that's the deal done. So that's generally where they are. There are resources you can use online to kind of search for land that, if you think, for example, this parcel of land may work as a development, you can use those resources to find them. You can then go on the land registry to download like the details of the owner, and you can write directly to them or contact them directly if you can find them online. So that's like a direct to vendor strategy. So they're kind of the main ways in which people contact landowners or get land deals across the line.
Cool. How does the pipes work when it comes to implementing bathrooms and kitchen? This person asks this because when they're picking a specific land, how does one take this into consideration? So I'll ask it again.
So the bathrooms and kitchens, it doesn't, like if you're buying land, you're building from scratch. So your bathrooms and kitchens like go wherever you want them to go, because you've got nothing, determining where they go. If, for example, you were converting a house or you were just refurbishing your own house, you have to think like joists only run one way. So if your drains are over in that corner and your joists run this way, you can't just easily move your bathroom because you've got the big 4-inch like waste pipe that you can't just cut through all those joists to get across to where your drains need to go. So you have kind of more of a determinant factor like that for bathrooms and kitchens when you're reconfiguring or converting an existing property. In regards to a new build, I think maybe more so what they're thinking about is new services. So obviously if, again, you've got a garage all the way down there, Thames Water are only going to bring their pipes up to the boundary of your land. So you're going to have to do all of your trenches to prepare them and all of your pipe work to prepare, to connect to Thames Water when they bring it in. A consideration would be when doing land deals, you have to pay for your new services. You have to pay for gas, you have to pay for water, you have to pay for electricity. Now, if you're on a kind of very straightforward just road where, you've just got a setback little driveway and you're doing a development there, maybe you pay sort of £3,000 to £5,000 per service. If you've got a land deal that's at the back of a garden, Thames are saying, look, or it's down like a long path or a long access route, that could be, in your 5 figures plus per service because of where you have to bring the pipe work in.
Okay.
So I've got a question actually. I guess it's just more about how you organize yourself, because obviously you have the forever changing landscape of regulations and legislations, etc. Do you have someone in your team that kind of breaks that down, or do you personally yourself stay on top of that?
Yeah, I'm very don't know if neurotic is the right word, but I internalize everything. So this last week effectively took on a virtual assistant to do to help virtual assistant and then PA to help with stuff and to start delegating. But for the last 7-8 years, pretty much everything, whether it comes down to project management, interior design, legislation, accounts, finance, almost everything was in-house with the odd assistance from professionals. But generally speaking, I think, which is something that, to be fair, is not necessarily the best way of doing it. And I think more recently I've realized that that to grow I have to invest in myself. So whether that means taking on staff and paying people and paying for systems and services to facilitate a more managed working environment. But I think that's something I've learned more recently about myself, that you know, naturally I just like to keep everything like in my head.
Yeah, I've got a little question I want to ask. Like, I'm big on sustainability.
That's Johnson, by the way. Before you start talking, like I recognize your voice.
Yeah, I'm big on sustainability. So when it comes to the housing market, have you started to implement stuff like solar roofing or water retention schemes, or is that not something you're looking at, or do you think that's viable for the future?
Yeah, personally, not yet. Like, obviously, I know a lot of developers that have, you know, do implement stuff like that. I think for me at the moment, I very much look at, you know, in terms of what I'm trying to achieve or what I'm trying to do, as much as obviously I'm conscious of environmental issues, I look at if I do, you know, if I can make money potentially long term, kind of work on my bubble and then give back in the long term. Because if I can put myself in a position where I can do more in the future with more, that's kind of always been my attitude. But don't get me wrong, just through changes in legislation, you mentioned that we have to do things and have to implement things, like whether that mean external insulation, which means that buildings are more heat efficient from the existing radiators, you know, changing radiators, making sure they have like different types of valves on them that make them more heat efficient and things like that. But in terms of actual eco, so whether that's down to the building materials, solar panels, and different more environmentally friendly build options, that's not something that I've personally sort of delved into. But I do have friends that, you know, that they're kind of, that's their market. And there is, beyond just from a sort of social responsibility side, there is a market for it, because if, you know, if you're creating a product, it might be more expensive to create an eco home, but at the same time, like somebody like yourself would pay a lot more for an eco home, because one, of their conscious, and two, also cost savings in the future. So I think it's an interesting area of the market to get into, and it brings another dynamic. But for myself, it's not something I've got into yet.
Fair enough. What's it called? There's something that's just on top of my head right now. Oh yeah, in terms of like services you offer, right? So if, for example, I had a house, I wanted to modernize it, reconfigure it, would you be the person that comes in and say, I got this, I don't have the time or the patience to run this project, but I've seen what you're capable of doing and I want something like this. Is that service that you
so
offer?
more recently, over the last 2 years, about diversification, I've realized that I've overdoing it repeatedly, maybe between sort of 30 to 40 projects for myself. I've realized that I've built a good build team, and obviously I'm not always busy. I'm not always, you know, there might be, I might have just sold places or just buying places and not always busy. So one thing I've done is kind of created an in-house construction team in which we can then go and do projects for other people as well.
Okay.
So so in that regards, we do quotations for whether it's like, you know, loft conversions, extensions, just refurbishments in general for other clients, be that other developers or owner occupiers. Okay,
cool. Sick. Do you ever got any more questions?
Yeah. I got 5 more. 2 more on land, I think. What is the process, and more importantly, what is the order of acquiring land?
This is just one person asking all these questions, isn't it? What is the process like?
So he's saying, e.g., acquiring a land, finding builders, acquiring a loan, lawyers for contracts.
So you find the land, you find who owns the land, you obviously approach them. If the land's not on the market, you approach them. If it is on the market, you approach whoever it's being marketed with, you agree a price. Now, a lot of land deals are what's called subject to planning. So you may agree a price on the basis of, if I get planning, I'm going to pay you X amount. So with that, you maybe have either a subject to planning offer, or you have a option agreement to buy the property for a pre-arranged price within a pre-arranged time frame, subject to you achieving your planning permission. So you agree that, or you just buy the land. You don't have to do it subject to plan. You can just say, you know, I'm really confident I'm going to do this. I think it's great value for money. I'm going to buy the land. So you'd put your offer in. If your offer is accepted, you would approach your lender to make sure they're happy to lend on land, and you've got the relevant finance in place to secure it. So within the residential space, That's like having your mortgage in principle, but like you're offering principal effectively with your lender. In regards to your builders, I mean, it depends on obviously your area of expertise, but prior to instructing your builders, you should kind of have or even prior to buying the land, you should have an idea of how much it's going to cost you to build it, because you know whether or not it's worth buying the land or not, based on what you want to build there. So again, you may just have very kind of initial early stage speculative conversations with your builders just to make sure your figures are right, or with a builder or with a contractor. Again, let's say you're building 3 houses, you just want to know what the price per square meter is to build these houses. Again, that may shift drastically depending on the planning, etc., that you get. Again, whether it's subject to planning or whether it's just a direct purchase. So you would whilst engaging with the legal process, you probably start engaging with your architect to go for your planning permission, etc. Who was the last person they asked about, order-wise?
Finding builders, requiring to learn, lawyers for contracts.
Yes, I mean, as you put your offer forward, there are a lot of things that really, a land deal is complex. So it's not something that I would maybe recommend. I mean, don't get me wrong, if that's what you want to do, I wouldn't try and dismiss anybody from doing anything. However, there's a lot of complexities and a lot of understanding in a land deal. So you need to understand your build costs. You need to understand your chances of getting planning. You need to understand, the legals. So really being to grips with all of those things ahead of maybe starting a deal like that would be very key. But in terms of builders, solicitors, your ability to lend, you almost need everything instantly. To be able to embark on a project like that, you should pretty much have confidence in your ability to execute the deal. And for you to execute the deal effectively, you would need that team, that core team around you, from day one.
Okay.
Man, this free information, they better buy that land,
like that.
Just dropping free game.
Once they give us one question, he came with like a whole library.
3 more. Are lawyers necessary for contracts during the purchasing of a property?
Yes.
That's straightforward. What is the approximate time frame in acquiring a land and having keys in your hand? How long is a piece of string?
Yeah, like why would your land have keys?
That's a very good question.
I mean, obviously some land could be gated or whatever, but yes, there's no answer to that question. It's like you said, the question is like, would you use a solicitor? It's kind of like, you don't need this, but if you're getting a lender, your lender's gonna expect your solicitor to satisfy the inquiries. You're gonna need somebody to sign your contracts and whatever, so you do need a solicitor. In regards to how long does it take, I mean, if you just have money and there's no lenders involved and no whatever, I guess you could just go and buy it and independently sort it all out. But you could buy land. I mean, so if you buy land at auction, you have to complete, in most cases, standards. There are different standards, but in most cases, you have to complete within 28 days of the purchase. So you you go to auction, you win the bid, you get your keys in 28 days. But that depends where you're buying the property from, what your terms are, how much back and forth there is, if it's subject to planning, if it's not, how many people own the land, if there's different charges over the land, lenders involved. There's all sorts of things. So a lender may look at the land. So for example, you may have agreed a price, but then when they do the survey on the area, it comes out that it's like a flood risk area, and then the lender comes back and says, we're not happy to lend anymore because of X, Y, and Z. So there's 1,000 things that could delay or speed up a purchase.
Okay, cool. I got one. So what's the best? What's, in your opinion, out of all the properties you've developed, what's the number one?
I mean, I could give you, I don't know if I have like a number one in terms of how I liked how it finished, or number wise, or
like just how it came out, like best looking.
I liked the one I mentioned, Khadija House, because that was an example of a conversion. I don't know if you're familiar with conversions at all.
Yeah, vaguely.
So conversion is kind of what it says. It's when you buy a property and you convert it into multiple units. So for that one, Bought the property 2015 for about 450,000. Good thing about conversions are you have an opportunity not to have all your eggs in one basket. In that worst case scenario, so I actually had 4 potential options of what we could do with that property. Option 1 was straight refurbish the property because it was like in a rundown state. Maybe spend 100,000 and hopefully sell for 600 to 650,000 pounds. So still scope even after fees and finance costs to make money there. Option 2 was to split the property into 2 flats, a 3-bed and a 2-bed. No extensions, no loft conversions, just straight split. Option 3 was to do a loft conversion and to split the property into 3 flats, a 1-bed, a 2-bed and a 3-bed. And option 4 was to split the property into 4 flats with a loft conversion, rear extension, and that would be 3 1-beds and a 2-bedroom flat. So I decided to go for option 3, which was a 3 flats, kind of like a high value strategy, but also not the most risky. So I did that. Did it for about, got planning after like 6 months to just start the works. Started the works. When we started them, decided, no, I'm not taking enough risk. Went back into the planning and got the option to do the 4th flat. Ended up being like a really nice project. 4 really nice flats, 2 with private gardens and the other 2 shared a garden. 3 of the flats had allocated parking. Just a nice project overall. In that, it looked nice, which is why, like I said, named it after my grandmother. Ended up selling everything for about 1.2 million, I think, for the 4 flats. So it was like nice deal. Worked out in terms of, numbers were great. Maybe spent 800,000 all in. It actually looked nice at the end. The people that bought there sold to some friends' mums, like other people that still love it to this day, really happy with the place. So it's always good when it ticks a lot of the boxes in terms of it works financially, works as like from an artistic point of view that I like the design, and then also works as creating homes for people, within the local area as well.
We've kind of come to the end of this episode. I think firstly for me, thank you for coming on.
Definitely.
I know you have been maybe inundated with people wanting to do this with you, or just how busy you are and how your page is growing. Are there any final words from you in terms of anyone who's listening that's trying to get into this space? Like what would be your final take?
I think in property as a whole, or just in goals as a whole, mine isn't so much property related, but it's just general in terms of trying to achieve something that everything sounds out of reach. But sometimes obviously have your long-term goals, but also focus on those short-term accountability moments. Like at the end of the day, can you look at yourself and say, what have I achieved today? What have I achieved this week? Because like I said, I said like high numbers, like you might need £130,000 to do a flip in London, but then you might need 20,000 to buy your first place. And all of those numbers might sound difficult, but to even do that flip or to buy your first property, you need to have good credit so you can work on your credit. To know what property to buy, you need expertise within the area. You can look online for free to learn mistakes and learn other things within the industry, or to start maybe a complementary business, whether that be an inventory business or a cleaning business. There's always things that you can be doing. So just work on your day-to-day sort of micro achievable moments, and by doing those things, you'll put yourself in a better position to be able to to get into property in the long term. So I think that's really my takeaway. That just sometimes the long game, have a focus point, but also make sure you get those daily wins and daily growth and daily progress.
That's fair.
That's the end.
Yeah.
Another Broker podcast. Make sure you check. What's your handle? Are you on Twitter and Insta? I know you're on Insta.
I'm on Insta. Yeah, I'm gonna be on everything soon. So, whoa. So listen, I feel like I told my assistant to make sure she goes to register all of the stuff, but no one going to register on Twitter. I'm going to be registered by the time this comes out. But yeah, so right now I'm just on Instagram, Property by Kazy. But yeah, gonna literally this year you're gonna see me everywhere, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, even we've got something coming for TikTok, because I feel like starting young is key as well. So looking at that demographic and that audience as well. YouTube as well, Property by Kazy, the YouTube, all one word, no spaces. You won't find it otherwise. At the moment, I've got one video on there, but I've shot 10 episodes of like my sort of day in the life of a property developer series. So that will be coming very soon. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to that. And yeah, if you want to connect with me, Instagram's the best place. Drop me a DM. I get a lot, but I always try and respond to everybody, whether it's something that I can't respond to directly, but I always try and get back to everyone. And I've got a lot of Q&As, so your kind of frequently asked questions, go through those Q&As, because a lot of the most commonly asked questions are in there as well.